5:30 says period. Okay. Tell or ask me anything in the chat. Tell or ask me anything in the chat. Mr. Beetle says your favorite soda. Coke. Tabitha says, how are you? I'm good, healthy. Collie says, I missed your streams. Well, I'm glad that you're here now. User Random says, you're famous now? Not really. I guess compared to when I would get like 5 viewers, yeah. But Jacqueline says, hi Don, how are you? Wave emoji. Good. Thank you for asking. Tell or ask me anything in the chat. User says, how many boyfriend and girlfriends do you have now? Well, no boyfriends. Tabitha says, like and subscribe, everyone. Only if you want to. Tell or ask me anything in the chat. Collie says, is Collie a cool name? Well, I like names that are only one syllable. That's what I prefer, so I guess not. Mr. Beetle says, do you think you will ever be a famous or popular YouTuber? Yeah, maybe. I think that's a possibility. Tabitha says, did you have a good weekend? Yeah, I did. It was good. 5:30 says, let me read your chat. That sounds interesting. Like getting a call with you and then you read the chat to me. I don't read it, you read it to me. That could be interesting. Chick Dog says, will you breed raccoons? No, but that sounds cool. C. Brian says, have you been to Mardi Gras in New Orleans? No. Valley says, you look like Jake La Moda. I don't know who that is. User says, bird Vina Birdgina. What? Shano says, Snorky Bear. Okay. M. Soa says, have you been to Washington State? I haven't. No Longer says, have you ever had a peanut butter flavored Jell-O? I haven't. Rafa says, you look like a very, very young Jake Paul. I don't think so. Collie says, are you only doing half-hour streams for the time being? It definitely seems like that if you look at my past streams, the length of them, but I'm not gonna say. Fuck it lol says, do you play any games? Not really, no. Flaff says, hello from Russia. Hello, Flaff. PR says, have you considered getting tested for autism? No. Asa says, you love night or morning? Night. Valley says, Jake La Motta was a boxer from the 50s and 60s and a mobster. Okay. Ukraine says, you look nerd. I look like a geek. Okay. Kelly says, you speak a little Spanish. I don't. Callie says, for one car, how many times does 3? What? Coca-Cola says, why did you grape your sister? I haven't sexually assaulted anyone. Me You says, this is a weird ass live. Yeah, I guess it is, yeah. I don't ban people, so the chats can get weird. Kelly says, are you familiar with the Duolingo app? I am. No Handle says, why did you groom me? I did not groom you. Phantom says, are you Charlie Kirk? Am I Charlie Kirk? No. Corey says, fuck what they think, just be you. That sounds like good advice, I think. Nina says, your energy is really dark, bro. I don't think so. No Handle says, you did. You brushed my hair with a comb, hence grooming me. Oh, and that way I groomed you? Still, wrong person. I didn't touch your hair. MSOA says, are you a good mechanic? No. Civil Monkey says, Dr. Don. Okay. C. Brian says, have you ever had a spiritual experience? No. Rafa says, what kind of Pop-Tart flavor would you like? The most popular one. Popular stuff is usually good. Ozzy says, is Hinge a good dating app? I don't know. Napart says, what we're doing. I'm just reading chat messages. Civil Monkey says, you need a new hairstyle, brother. Maybe I do. Name says, Allah sent prophets to guide the mankind. You people worship the idols. You're trying to move me towards Islam. Thank you, but I don't believe in that. Corey says, what is your favorite thing to see your influence upon in life? I don't know what you mean. The ALSK says, hello, remember me? I don't, sorry. Brad says, look like you'd enter a school playing Pumped Up Kicks. Are you saying I look like a school shooter? Okay. 843 says, do you do this for you or for us? I mean, partly for me. It's pretty entertaining seeing like random messages. Big says, bro, forcing himself to be nonchalant. I don't think so. Nicole says, you skipped me again, not cool. Sorry. Civil Monkey says, shorten the sides, don't let hair pass your ears. That's your recommendation for my hairstyle. Thank you. The ALSK says, I don't know why my other handle is showing up. Yeah, it changed. The YouTube thing changed. Variety says, is doing live your passion? It's somewhat. 843 says, I wish I had your process of thought. You wish you could think like me? Okay. The ALSK says, I'm anonymous. Okay, that, I remember you now. Big Curtis says, pop the pimple on your lip. Isn't popping pimples bad? Mr. Mouth says, like and subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification button to get notified when Parasocial Don Benitez goes live. Thank you for saying that, but don't say that. Just let people do what they want to do. Go Channy says, have you determined an optimal chat cooldown time? I kind of like not having a cooldown. I just like the chaos of a fast chat. Enemy says, I subbed Big Boy. You're doing great, you big boy. Okay. Mouth says, true. You're agreeing with something I said. Okay. AT says, I'm sick of seeing your face on lives every time. Wear a mask. I'm not gonna wear a mask. Jake says, this is brain rotting. Yeah, I guess it is, but I think it's less brain rot than YouTube Shorts. MSOS says, do you believe ghosts are real? No. Pont says, laughing out loud, you're funny, and you're not even trying to be. Okay. Brian says, this guy's eyes move like someone who has for sure pre-ordered the Blu-ray of Pitch Perfect 2. Huh. Okay. Blue says, do you support Israel? No comment. Indy says, want rubs? No. Collie says, I don't know if cats have souls, but they definitely have catitude. Catitude, like attitude? Okay. Big says, what are you, Mexican? Am I a citizen of Mexico? No. Wavy says, are you a robot? No, I have blood in me. Big Mamo says, so you disapprove ghosts? Do I disapprove ghosts? Well, I don't believe in them, so. Callie says, Dawn, how many times does it take for Sneak Urbar to reach the center in 2.5 times 1.5? What? Go Channy says, didn't believe in them until then? Until you saw a ghost? Is that what you're saying? Okay. Mark says, in the morning before you brush your teeth, put a little spit on pimples. That works. I probably won't do that, but thank you for the recommendation. Meme says, you should believe. Believe what? Big Curtis says, what is your ethnicity? I mean, I'm not, what I usually describe myself as is Hispanic, Latino. Go Channy says, I have a perfectly clear picture of the ghost of a human. You have a picture of a ghost? That's fake. EJ says, why do you abruptly end stream when your mom wakes up for work? That's not how things work. Kathleen says, are you sad for all the loved ones that had to go? Sure. Frank says, have you ever blowed bubbles when you were a kid? Like bubbles? Probably. Maybe. Go Channy says, I thought it was all bullshit until I took the photo myself. It still has metadata that shows the original location and all. I don't believe in that. Ghosts are fake. MSOA says, do you think there's life after death? Life like similar to what I'm experiencing right now? Probably not. I don't think so. Trone Super chatted $2 American. Thank you, Trone. Trone says happy Thanksgiving. Chirky emoji. Happy Thanksgiving to you too. Thank you, Trone. I appreciate it. Clapper says perhaps. Okay. Gochani says not really a character, just true to the title. Tell or ask me anything. I mean, I'm not forcing myself to be a certain way, I'll say that. Asa says, would you sell your car for a kid? I don't want to buy a kid. Biss says, bro, you need sunlight? I think I'm fine, actually. Brad says, stopped reading my comments after I said the last one. I don't ignore anyone in particular. Unless it's something like illegal. Paul says, I'm finally here. You've been streaming late as hell lately. Yeah, I have been. Huge Rod says, ever smell your own farts? No. Coca-Cola says, my name is Don Benitez, and I take full legal responsibility for all 7-Eleven robberies since 2019. I was just reading a message there. That's not real. Dolly says, hello, subbed. You subscribed? Okay. The Fifth says, damn, bro, your head is huge. My head is big. Batmite says, Trump tongue? What? Cap says, if the Sliders guy and Mark from Severance had a kid, that's who you're saying I look like. Okay. EJ says, my wife and I are both in our 70s, and I think you'd make a better president than the current office holder. I don't think so. Jacqueline super chatted $8 Australian. Thank you, Jacqueline. Jacqueline says, I'm loving your channel and your vibe. Thank you, I appreciate it. And I appreciate you being here for all these streams, even though maybe this is a waste of time. Thank you again for your super chat. Russell super chatted $5 Canadian. Thank you, Russell. And Russell says, finger pointing emoji. What I'm doing right now. Thank you, Russell. I appreciate it. Susan says, what is your site about? My live streams, just this. I don't have a website. Brock says, do you laugh or smile, or is that the point of this live? I smile. I would prefer to smile more. I smile often during streams, actually. EJ says, Pablo Honey, come to Florida? I don't... What's Pablo Honey? Isn't that an album? Skibbity says, are you Asian? No. David says, why people hating? Because when you hate people, give hate comments, it makes things more exciting. I've sent a lot of hate comments on things and trolled people as well. Jeffrey says 10 different guys or one guy 10 times. I don't want to think about that. I'll cross that bridge if and when I get there. This says fucking demon, I knew it. I'm not a demon. Lou says, how come you didn't keep up with your COVID boosters? 'Cause no comment. MSOA says, if you had one message for the world, what would it be? I wouldn't say anything. Blaze says, bro's actually ignoring my comments. I'm not. Skibbity says, do you just sit there and read chat? Yeah. DV says, what do you think about Trump try to close bodegas because they make the community less safe? I don't have an opinion on that. Is that really a thing? DV's, oh, I already read that. Elliot says, Don, what's your favorite music genre? Rock, I guess. Juicy says, how many hours a week do you spend doing this? Well, I've been doing this on average half an hour per day recently. Sheen says, why do you look away when you answer the questions? Because moving around helps me think. Pard says, yo moron, how's it going? Hello, Pard. Lil Man says, answer the phone. There's no ringing phone near me. Vale says, do you still like microwaves? Is your eye okay? Yeah, I like microwaves, and my eyes feel fine. Skibbity says, is this your job? No. Mr. Barber says, would you do a Ouija board? No, but maybe I would have one as decoration. Kosht says, what's your opinion on having sleep all time? My opinion on sleeping all the time, death. I hope to not reach it. Boy says, where are you from? The United States of America. Private Citizen says, eye emoji, mouth emoji, eye emoji. You made a face, cool. Elizabeth says, do you play Fortnite? Yeah, sometimes with once in a blue moon. Forgotten says, what do you do? A Luigi board? Luigi, like the Mario character, board? What's that? Paul says, did Diddy bend you over? Thankfully not. MSOS says, did you go to college? I'm not gonna say. Asa says, what is your favorite game of all time? Red Dead Redemption 1. Pard says, looking high on something? I'm not high. Brad says, do you have a mental illness? I don't. 530 says, what would you prefer, being a Diddy slave or get recruited by the army during World War II? I'll cross that bridge if and when I get there. Temer says, don't ignore me, balding. You're saying I'm balding? I don't think I am. Thrift says, what would you do if I saw you in public and ran up to you for a hug? I would either shove you or back away. PGA says, have a good day, bro. Thank you. Ali says, I have a quick question. If you had to send a tiny message to the whole world, what would it be? I don't think I would send a message. I wouldn't, I feel like that's too much of a responsibility. I would just not do anything. I do remember a meme where someone was asked that and they said, your God is real. That's the thought that they would implant. That's something. Noel says pink eye? No. Jarg said, do you believe small hats equal big problems? No comment. Quant says, very satire, we need to make fun of the internet. Am I doing that? I don't know if I'm doing that. Nick says, are you into docking? No. Abna says, why are you doing this? Just for fun. YouTube success. Bo says, what time is it there? I'm not gonna say. Allie says, yes, I just dropped a short. Yours will be coming soon. You're making a YouTube short with me in it. Interesting. Compared says, what's your personal plan? Not gonna say. Abdullah says, you need a dog and get out of the house, man. Maybe. Quant says, I've been on the internet since you were probably 2, I know. Okay. Thrift says, are you into butt plugs? No. Skibbity says, how long have you been doing this? Since September. CM says, what's the longest stream you done? It was 8 hours something minutes, 8 hours. Carlos says, he's not into them, they're into him. Nope. Coca-Cola says, what's your least favorite race, starting with N? No comment. Jarg says, should America be renamed Amer Israel? You're using that to say that Israel's like has a real hold over America? Okay. Grady says, I heard you was gay, Donnie. I'm not. Aussie says, would you rather a Iron Man suit or 10 goth girls? I don't want the goth girls. That no human trafficking. Skibbity says, what's your favorite YouTuber? Salsi1. Jetri says, hello from Estonia. Hello, Jetri from Estonia. Fram says, do you remember? Do I remember what? Jarg says, do you believe a 5th generation Italian immigrant in America can still call themselves Italian? No comment. Allie says, Jacqueline, thinking emoji, praying emoji. You're talking to Jacqueline in the chat? Okay. Bo Clay says, do you play soccer? I don't. Clapper says, bro, half these people are either trying to dox or harass you, man. Nobody's trying to dox me that I've seen. I think you're wrong. Tabby says, if we can't see air but we can see water, can fish see air and not see water? I don't know. Frosty says, hello again, I subbed. Hello, Frosty. Microwave says, do you prefer Mexican or Chinese food, mommy? Mexican food. Volcano says, love from India. India, flag emoji. Hello. Beauclay says, I play soccer. Okay. Kay says, if water have no color, then how? You're talking about that fish, do they see water question? Okay. Collie says, has anyone ever hung up on you and you out loud said, nobody hangs up on Donnie? No, I don't like the name Donnie. Cal says, would you rather be a stupendous salad or a courageous pizza? Courageous pizza. No comment. Jesus says, why did the chicken cross the road? Because it wanted to get to the other side. Logan says, change your shirt. My shirt's clean. Bradley says, I was frozen today. Sorry. Tyler says, is this a social experiment? Yeah, I guess in a way. Yeah. I'm gonna end the stream now.